These days, I often find myself thinking, the world is just upside down. It just seems like everything is upside down, backwards, 180 degrees out of phase, whatever term you want to use. The words of the prophet Isaiah ring in my ear, and they go like this. It's in Isaiah 5, verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. What do you do when these kinds of things are happening? Maybe you start to feel like maybe I'm the one who's just backwards. Maybe I'm the one who's just so out of touch that I'm just totally wrong. And by saying that, I don't mean to imply that any of us are above correction or any of us are in a place where our views or our opinions are never wrong. Of course, that's not true. We're always trying to learn. We're always trying to grow. I know personally, I always try, with all that's been going on in our nation, everything that's been happening, I'm trying to look, best I can, as objectively as I can. I'm trying to look at different sides of the debate and such like that. But you reach a point where you just say, wait a minute, time out. This is backwards. This is upside down. How did our law enforcement officers go from being highly esteemed, respected, appreciated, and desperately needed to all of a sudden becoming the villains? How did that happen in just a few weeks? And listen, I get it. I understand. We've all seen it. You know it as well as I do. We've seen the misdeeds. We've seen the problems. But you stop and you say, wait a second. Wait a second. Do people ever stop to think that maybe what they consider to be the cure is worse than the disease? In many ways, I think what's happening today, it reminds me, at least personally, it reminds me of the plight of the nation of Israel. So often, Israel is demonized. Israel is looked at as the bad guy. From many nations in the world, from the United Nations especially, it's the Jews. The problem is the Jews. The problem is the Jewish state, the nation of Israel. And I think the Jews have kind of gotten used to it. We're going to be blamed. We're going to be demonized. We're just kind of used to it. Israel may not be perfect. Obviously, it's not perfect. But look at the neighborhood that the nation of Israel is in. And when you look at the neighborhood, you realize that most of the time, more often than not, Israel's the good guy in the midst of all this. But you'd never know it by listening to the news. You would never know it by reading the UN resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, that are written again and again to demonize and blame Israel for every ill that happens in the Middle East and beyond sometimes. And how can, the Jewish state, how can they possibly negotiate with people whose stated goal is to totally eliminate them, to destroy the nation of Israel, period? It's pretty hard to negotiate with somebody when that's their stated goals. Just another example of the world being upside down. How can we have a constructive discussion about change in our nation when the stated goals of some of the leaders of these movements is a total overthrow of our system of government and of our institutions? Another thing, I'm just thinking of different examples. How, in the name of convenience, can a mother, and even sometimes the father as well, choose to end the life of their unborn child, often in the name of convenience? It's just, and why am I throwing that in? Because I'm just looking at things where, you look at it and you try to understand it and you say, wait a second, the world is upside down. This is backwards. This is wrong. This is not the way that it should be. My solution is always the same. And I go again and again. I've preached about it in church. I've talked about it, I think, in some of these recordings. Psalm 73, verse 17, when the psalmist said, "Then I went in to the sanctuary of God." And again, I just tell you, I just implore you, please, when you look at what's happening in our world, and it's so easy to get discouraged, it's so easy to just want to throw up your hands and say, I just don't know. You've got to get into the presence of God. You've got to get closer to Him. You've got to find His heart. Amen? So just another simple, just a simple exhortation for you. I hope you'll take it to heart. God bless.